Whispers in the dark. The old house on the edge of town had always been shrouded in mystery. Stories of ghosts and hauntings had followed it for generations, whispered around campfires and passed down through the years. Most dismissed them as mere folklore, but those who had spent a night within its walls knew better. One autumn evening, a group of friends, eager for adventure, decided to spend the night in the old house. They gathered their sleeping bags and flashlights, laughing and joking as they approached the looming structure. As they entered, a chill settled over them, and the laughter faded. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. The floorboards creaked beneath their feet, and shadows danced in the corners of their vision. They set up camp in the living room, determined to brave the night. But as darkness fell, strange things began to happen. They heard footsteps in the hallway, whispers in the walls. Shadows seemed to move of their own accord, reaching out with icy fingers. One by one, the friends began to disappear. At first, they thought it was a prank, a game gone too far. But as the night wore on, and the numbers dwindled, fear gripped their hearts. Only two remained, Sarah and Mark, huddled together in the corner, their eyes wide with terror. They knew they had to escape, but the house seemed to have a hold on them, trapping them within its walls. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence, a ghostly whisper that sent shivers down their spines. "Get out," it hissed, "before it's too late." With a cry, Sarah and Mark ran for the door, but it was locked tight. Frantically, they searched for a way out, their hearts pounding in their chests. The walls seemed to close in around them, the shadows reaching out to grab them. Just as they were about to give up hope, they found a hidden passage, leading down into the darkness below. Without hesitation, they descended into the depths, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small, candlelit room. In the center stood a figure cloaked in darkness, its eyes burning with an otherworldly light. "You should not have come here," the figure intoned, its voice echoing through the chamber. "This house is cursed, haunted by those who died within its walls." Sarah and Mark were frozen with fear, unable to move. The figure raised its hand, and a gust of wind blew out the candles, plunging them into darkness. When the light returned, Sarah and Mark found themselves outside the house, the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon. They ran, never looking back, knowing they had escaped the clutches of the ghosts that haunted the old house on the edge of town. As they ran, Sarah looked back one last time, and in the dim light of the rising sun, she thought she saw the figure standing in the doorway, watching them go with eyes that burned like embers in the dark. They returned to town, shaken but alive, and vowed never to speak of their night in the old house again. But the memory of that night lingered, a dark shadow in their minds, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the world beyond the safety of the daylight. Years passed, and the old house on the edge of town remained empty, a silent sentinel overlooking the town. But on certain nights, when the wind howled and the moon was hidden behind dark clouds, some said they could still hear whispers in the dark, the echoes of the ghosts that haunted the old house, waiting for their next victim. The legend of the old house on the edge of town grew, becoming a cautionary tale told to children to keep them away. But for Sarah and Mark, it was more than just a story. It was a night they would never forget, a night that had changed them forever, a night spent in the company of ghosts. They say that the old house still stands, a testament to the darkness that lies within us all. And on certain nights, when the moon is full and the air is still, some say they can still hear the whispers in the dark, calling out to those who dare to listen. The Haunting of Hollow Manor. Hollow Manor had stood on the outskirts of town for as long as anyone could remember, its dark silhouette looming over the landscape like a shadow from the past. Stories of its haunted halls had been whispered for generations, tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained phenomena that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. One fateful night, a group of friends, eager for adventure, decided to spend the night in Hollow Manor. They had heard the stories, but dismissed them as mere superstition, believing that there was nothing to fear but fear itself. As they entered the manor, a sense of foreboding washed over them, the air thick with a palpable darkness that seemed to seep from the very walls. The once grand interior was now a decaying shell of its former self, the once elegant furnishings now covered in dust and cobwebs. They set up camp in the grand foyer, determined to brave the night. But as darkness fell, strange things began to happen. Shadows danced on the walls, whispers echoed through the halls, and a chill settled in their bones that no fire could warm. One by one, the friends began to disappear, their cries for help silenced by the oppressive atmosphere of the manor. Only Emma remained, huddled in a corner, her eyes wide with terror as she watched her friends vanish into the darkness. As the night wore on, Emma felt a presence watching her, a malevolent force that seemed to feed on her fear. She tried to flee, but the doors were locked, the windows barred shut. She was trapped, alone in the darkness with whatever haunted Hollow Manor. Suddenly, a figure materialized before her, its form twisted and contorted, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It spoke to her in a voice that chilled her to the core, a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "You should not have come here," it hissed, its words dripping with malice. "This is our domain, and you are not welcome." Emma tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. She could only watch in horror as the figure advanced towards her, its outstretched hand reaching for her throat. In a last desperate act of defiance, Emma reached into her pocket and pulled out a small vial of holy water she had brought with her. With all the strength she could muster, she flung the vial at the figure, watching as it exploded in a shower of light. The figure screamed in agony, its form dissipating into nothingness. With a final burst of courage, Emma ran for the door, the darkness of Hollow Manor seeming to reach out for her as she fled into the night. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Hollow Manor stood silent once more, its dark secrets hidden once again. Emma never spoke of her night in the manor, but the memory of the darkness and fear that had enveloped her would stay with her for the rest of her days. Years passed, and Hollow Manor remained abandoned, a dark spectre on the edge of town. Some said that the spirits of the manor's former occupants still lingered within its walls, their restless souls unable to find peace. Others claimed that the manor was cursed, doomed to forever be a beacon of darkness in the world. No one dared to enter Hollow Manor after dark, for fear of what horrors lay within. And yet, on certain nights, when the wind howled and the moon was hidden behind dark clouds, some said they could still hear whispers in the dark, the echoes of the past that refused to be forgotten. The legend of Hollow Manor grew with each passing year, a cautionary tale told to children to keep them away. But for those who had experienced its horrors firsthand, it was more than just a story. It was a night they would never forget, a night that had changed them forever, a night spent in the company of darkness and fear. Story 3: The Blue Spooky. In the small town of Willow Creek, there was a legend that spoke of a creature known only as the Blue Spooky. It was said to be a ghostly figure that appeared only on the darkest of nights, its blue, ethereal form striking fear into the hearts of those who crossed its path. The legend of the Blue Spooky had been passed down through generations, a cautionary tale told to children to keep them from venturing too far into the woods at night. But as the years passed, the story became little more than a bedtime story, a harmless piece of folklore that entertained more than it frightened. That is, until one fateful evening, when a group of teenagers decided to test the legend for themselves. They were a daring bunch, known for their love of adventure and their willingness to push the boundaries of what was considered safe. On a moonless night, they ventured deep into the woods, armed with nothing but a flashlight and their own courage. The darkness seemed to swallow them whole as they made their way through the dense underbrush, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. As they ventured further into the woods, the air grew colder, and a sense of unease settled over them. The once familiar trees now loomed like shadowy giants, their branches reaching out like gnarled fingers. Suddenly, a chill ran down their spines as they heard a faint, haunting melody drifting through the trees. It sounded like a lullaby, soft and melancholic, yet somehow menacing. The teenagers exchanged nervous glances, but pressed on, drawn by a morbid curiosity they could not explain. As they rounded a bend in the path, they came upon a clearing bathed in an otherworldly blue light. In the center stood the blue spooky, its form shimmering like moonlight on water. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and its mouth twisted into a sinister grin. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew they should run, but something held them in place, a strange fascination with the creature before them. The blue spooky spoke, its voice like the whisper of the wind through the trees. "Who dares to enter my domain?" it asked, its words echoing through the clearing. One of the teenagers, a boy named Jack, stepped forward, his voice trembling. We mean no harm," he stammered. "We just wanted to see if the legend was true." The blue spooky chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "Oh, the legend is true," it said. "But you have yet to see the extent of my power." With a wave of its hand, the blue spooky summoned a thick fog that enveloped the clearing, obscuring everything from view. The teenagers cried out in fear, their voices lost in the swirling mist. When the fog finally cleared, the teenagers found themselves standing at the edge of the woods, their minds foggy and their memories hazy. They could not remember how they had gotten there, or what had happened in the woods. As they made their way back to town, they were plagued by nightmares of the blue spooky, its haunting melody echoing in their minds. They tried to convince themselves that it had all been a trick of the mind, a shared hallucination brought on by fear. But deep down, they knew the truth. The blue spooky was real, and it had shown them that there are some legends that should never be tested. The memory of that night would haunt them for the rest of their days, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the world beyond the safety of the town's borders. Years passed, and the legend of the blue spooky grew. It became more than just a story told to scare children, it became a part of the town's history, a dark chapter that was never spoken of in polite company. No one dared to enter the woods at night anymore, for fear of encountering the blue spooky. And yet, on certain nights, when the wind howled and the moon was hidden behind dark clouds, some said they could still hear the haunting melody drifting through the trees, a reminder that some legends are best left untested.